Okay, again, we are live, and by again, I mean for one last time. Welcome to the final session of the Global Groove Electronic Music Journalism Workshop Program hosted by Groove in collaboration with the German Goethe Institute. If you've been following us throughout the past 2 weeks, you will already know some of our participants, and we are very happy that today all of them will present their own perspectives on music journalism and what it means to report on regional scenes in a globalized world. So each of them will briefly present why they think our line of work still matters, what problems and potentials they see for the future, or what they think of the status quo when it comes to music journalism, amongst others. After we, so Laura, my colleague, and I have dominated most of these sessions, we're really looking forward to hearing more from them. And of course, if you have any questions, if you have any comments on what's being said in this group discussion, please use the YouTube live chat. We will collect everything and try to bring it up on your behalf. So, well, a word on our participants. We received a stunning 170 applications for this workshop program, and putting together even a long list of 25 names was already very, very hard, and narrowing it down then to 10 people with together with the people at Goethe Institute was even harder. We're confident, though, that the people that we have selected are the best ones to tell the story that need to be told. You will hopefully be able to read all of them starting from early November at Groove Magazine. And yeah, without further ado, I'd like to call them one by one in alphabetical order. Before we open the discussion for the others, and also, like I said, everyone who's watching and has a comment or a question on YouTube. And we start with Aman. Aman is from Mumbai and has a birthday today. He studied production and composition in Liverpool, and he currently writes for Wild City, covering, I think he put it as everything that's not Bollywood in India. So Aman, welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Yeah, sure. So, I mean, before I can even talk about, because I'll be speaking from a perspective of an India-based journalist, right? So it's sort of important to hear where my perspective comes from. Like, if you're talking about music journalism in India, you got to understand what the space is like in which us journalists exist in India. So, as I said, it's very different from like the Western countries, because when you guys talk about music, you might be thinking of venues, bands, or something like that. But in India, when you say and there's a subgenre. While in India, the minute you say music, if I say music to my family, my relatives, they only think Bollywood. So like anything outside of it is super niche. And you know how back in our talk with Tilo last week, was asking, at what point did electronic music become part of Berlin's or Germany's culture? And we talked about how it started in the 80s, and then so we are sort of in that 80s stage right now. Like it's exciting, but at the same time we're just forming the industry. So what that means is also that it's like a very small group of people who everybody knows each other, and we are sort of like just, and to be honest, it's more like upper class sort of part of India, the people like me who have had the privilege of going abroad, studying abroad, and coming back, or and people like me and our friends of friends already know about this culture, but we are still sort of collectively trying to figure out how to break into a wider audience so we can actually make this industry an industry. We can make it sustainable, which it currently hardly is. And again, what that means is there's only very few journalists, the freelancers, there's really handful. And the others work for music publications, which is the sort of space that I come in, except obviously these places also, subscription models don't work for us. Even for Spotify didn't work, which is it's struggling to convert people to paid subscriptions in India. So that means we always double up our revenue streams, throwing events and doing, again, paid campaigns, working as consultancies. And again, that creates those three words, conflict of interest, that we've been talking about all week. So that's basically what the space is like here. And but the other thing with us is that because we're such a huge country in terms of population, when I say a small percentage, our small percentage means 100,000 people or something like that. And that means, we, because of that, we do get lots of all sorts of exciting artists. Everybody you can think of in electronic music sort of comes to India at some point. And, things have been growing or were growing before Corona, which does put us on the world map. And we do have places like Resident Advisor, Mix Mag, writing for Magnetic Field Festival or what, or like other festivals. But that too in a very PR sort of way. And in terms of where we are in music journalism in India right now, it's like it has, as I said, because it's such a small industry, there's some problems, which I mentioned a few days back. We are constantly stepping on each other's toes, and you have to be really careful about if you write critically about somebody, because they might not give you access to, you have to be really careful about not offending somebody because it's such a small structure, which is where that problem comes in, the term that you use to misplace solidarity. So, that's there. But again, as I said, the exciting thing is because it's starting now, it feels like whoever is doing anything in these 10 years is gonna possibly be remembered in the history of things, because we're just starting out. So like any conversation, any discourse that we're having, sort of building up the legacy of the whole journalism. So how it actually fits in with the global journalism in the global discourse, I would say, is that obviously, the reason we compare to Berlin or Germany, our music scene, is because we have to learn from you. Okay, how did you reach a point where electronic music is a cultural asset instead of seen as this outside culture that we brought into the country, right? While at the same time, obviously, the Western countries just had this burning crack that they have failed to incorporate narratives from minorities or from a certain dominant group. So there's a lot of subdued narratives. So it's like, I feel like the way for Indian journalism in India is sort of to go both ways, because even in our countries we are sort of the elites, and there's a problem of elitism. So we have to sort of go to the other parts of the population that we cannot reach, and at the same time, in the global stage, it feels like it can really benefit from collaborating with other countries, because other countries are struggling to find how to incorporate these other narratives, and we are sort of the other narratives. We are sort of just part of those population who are considered other narratives. So yeah, that's where I think regional journalism in India is and how it fits on the global scene. So yeah.
Okay, wonderful. That's a lot of input already, and I already have some questions, I think. But I think we're gonna just go one by one and then open up the group. Please take notes. I will definitely do so. Thank you, Aman, so far. And next up would be Crystal, who has unfortunately not joined us yet. So we're going over to Cairo, to Fadi, who's a freelance journalist and who wrote for the Egypt-based publication Scene Noise, whose editor-in-chief he became in 2019. Hi, Fadi.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing okay. Happy birthday, Aman. And I want to start off by thanking Chris and Laura for all the wonderful work they've done throughout this program. It's honestly been a pleasure to meet all of you, and I really hope to meet every single person here in person very soon. If you can let me share my screen, I actually put together a presentation, which I haven't finished, unfortunately, but it's like 95% finished.
Okay, thank you for the kind words, first off. And yes, I've just made it possible for you to share your screen. Thank you very much.
Okay. Right, so can you guys see? Not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. I'm from Egypt, as Christopher has told you, and in the sense, the publications I've worked for, and the only one I've worked for so far, has had a pan-Arab reach, and we didn't focus specifically on Egypt, but on the rest of the Middle East. This includes obviously, Lebanon, Jordan, some of the Gulf, the Maghreb, which is Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco, all the way down to Sudan. Right. So I kind of just went through the questions you guys sent, and I've tried to come up with answers for most of them. And what kind of got me into the job was basically I loved music so much to the point where only thing I cared about was just, shedding light on music that I like and people who I think deserve to be heard and, have their voices out there. So that was my main driving, force behind all of my work for the past 3 or 4 years. The media coverage in Egypt is actually it's quite tricky. No one's really doing it, I'd say. I mean, obviously not anyone completely, but the majority of people in it are just there to just be chummy and be friends with everyone and get on the guest list and get free passes to the festivals that cost too much. But yeah, for the most part, a lot of publications who do it, even if they're not exclusively music publications are just like pleasing someone, or they're just like, pulling a favor for someone. And I've again tried to change that during my time at C Noise, but again, it's overwhelming because there are so many people who are trying to do it, even if they have no authority or no background. Even lifestyle magazines would end up posting about musicians, and it would be completely off the rails piece of content because there's no point in it. They're just like asking them, oh, what do you have for lunch after the gig, or what's your favorite drug and stuff like that. And it's just there's no point in it. So the main publications in the region are C Noise and Maazif. C Noise is mainly in English. They do have an Arabic section, and Maazif is in fact a Fusha Arabic publication, which makes it very limited for international audiences. And even for some of the Arab audiences, because the Fusha Arabic is a very classical type of Arabic. However, it's the only kind of common Arabic or that can like transcend dialects between Arab countries. One of the perks of working for C Noise for me was obviously it's in English, and I can really get the word out there to a much wider range of people than those here in the country or in the region. And I've seen that reflect into like actual bookings for a lot of artists and like other interview opportunities and label signings and stuff like that, which has been truly amazing for them and for myself. Another pro for C Noise was they had in-house production, which was, it's a major perk if you want to do video content. We didn't have to outsource, we didn't have to hire freelancers. And if you had a solid script, you could just take the production team from the same office and just go do something else. These drawbacks in general that are for C Noise and for other publications as well is a lot of people just care too much about just being in your face all the time or on your feed in terms of being on social media. And that really doesn't really reflect in a positive way, because then you have a certain quota to fill, and you can't really control the quality of the work that's going out because you care too much about the quantity or about just being on people's faces all the time, especially during a time like the pandemic. Some magazines just went crazy and they were like, okay, we need to post 5-6 times a day, and we don't care what you post, we just need to be in everyone's face. Again, like many publications here, the founders are very friendly, and they're they're the elite of the society, and they're in a bunch of social circles, and that obviously creates pressure on a lot of the staff writers and the editorial team because they're trying to please their friends as well. The last thing I'd say is, for the most part, being an English-speaking publication, you somehow always try, to talk from the perspective of someone who doesn't know anything about the scene, and therefore, writing it in English and trying to think of a foreign audience in mind, you end up almost self-fetishizing yourself and artists in your country, just to make it more accessible to people abroad. without really keeping in mind, the local audience or the native people in your country who care to hear about this music. Ma'azif, as I've said, is a Fusha Arabic platform. Their pieces are, again, very well researched. They don't really care about the quota as much. They don't publish as much. However, it takes them a lot of time. Like I wouldn't say they're inefficient. However, it takes a lot of time for them to, to keep up with the current releases and everything that's going on. And of course, like I said, the Fusha Arabic is a barrier. And some of the founders are musicians, which again is, as we've discussed, conflicts of interest before, is a big one. In terms of where do I get my news from, it's usually obviously like social. I don't have access to a very rich inbox anymore because I'm not employed full time for a publication. However, it's social media posts by artists who I know, and then obviously I wouldn't rely on that as my main source, but then I'd reach out to the artists or their friends to verify the information. I'd try and get dig deeper. Obviously, the platforms I mentioned are a big source for me still, and that's it. You're right. Frequent obstacles I encounter when I work. The conflicts of interest here are really, they're off the charts, as I've mentioned. Everyone has, there's something to gain out of doing anything. And people don't really try that hard to hide it anymore, Yes, that artist is my friend. And yes, I've written 5 features about him before, and there's nothing you can do about it. In fact, if you even point this out, you're often criticized. Also, artists themselves are not very open to criticism. I have had personal threats of violence from a bunch of rappers before, for for a bad review, which was honestly, it's a fun story which I can tell you after the live stream. And yeah, most publications just follow this ethos of if you don't have something nice to say, just don't say it and avoid us the headache, Another obstacle is obviously finding original artists in Egypt, which honestly is not even an obstacle, but it's trying to find artists who are original, who would also appeal to a wide range of people. Because, like I said, the remnants of colonialism here are still massive, and people look to the West for inspiration. Like Aman said, in a positive sense, as they're trying to find the blueprint for stuff, but in a lot of sense, just blindly being a copycat, just like. If you ask any artist or any DJ specifically in Egypt, like, what's your dream? They're like, oh, I want to play in Berghain. But that's really as far as it goes for them. They don't really have anything beyond that. They just want to, blindly become this sensation without really offering anything original or new to their country or to their respective scenes. In terms of being a journalist, music journalist here in the region, or at least in Egypt, from my experience, it's never enough as a long-term job. It pays barely enough to cover the bills if you're lucky enough to be employed full-time anyway. A lot of people who are in it are of privileged backgrounds. Again, like Aman said, we have a lot of similarities here. So if you're privileged enough to be in that position, a lot of times when you come to interview artists from certain backgrounds, it creates a certain gap. And there might be even like communication barrier, or like they might not even be very receptive of you because of such, of preconceived elitism. Again, something Aman has touched on. And that is not necessarily something that's in the favor of the scene. If you're someone who is from a very privileged background and you're trying to cover people who may not share the same privilege, it creates a gap that's really hard to avoid. What would I like to see more of? I'd like to see more of, content that is not sponsored, or content that is not being shoved down our throats by a major sponsor, or, someone who has paid a large sum of money to just have product placement and everything I'm trying to learn about, Yeah, I just love for people, especially publications, to reach out for more of the local journalists and people who can, represent their scenes in a true fashion. And yeah, that's pretty much it. What would I like to see more of? I would like to see more of, as well, tutorials and guides, especially for artists, especially when it shows experienced artists as well sharing knowledge. and I'd like to see more video content, which is something I've been, you know, sort of experimenting with for a while now, and I've done several of these, and I would like to continue to do that. In terms of fostering a more international exchange between music scenes and journalists, I think it needs to start with the venues before it starts with journalists, for sure. Because a lot of venues abroad need to start looking into booking from outside of Europe and the US. And even here in the Middle East, we face this problem where even countries that are an hour's flight away, we don't really exchange talents, and we don't really care to see what the neighboring countries have to offer in terms of music. And general mindset here, again, that's very, very annoying for me, is people only care about international acts, and so do the promoters, obviously, because they believe if people only care about international acts, that's where the money is, and there is no point in booking locals or booking, you know, or just investing in the talent that's just right next to us, you know. However, I believe there is a window to change all of this, because since the COVID pandemic hit the clubbing scene in the region very violently, promoters won't be able to afford the big fees that the European, you know, agents and DJs set up. And hence they'll start looking inside, you know, they'll start looking towards their own scenes and see what they can invest in and showcase, as it's becoming less viable to go for the bigger bookings. So I believe we have a narrow window to make this happen, something I've been actively trying to work on between clubs and promoters from across the region. Yeah, that's where my presentation ended.
Thank you very much. That was incredibly thorough and very good in-depth look into the MENA region as a whole. Thank you so much. And I think we can already see a lot of, well, let's say trends or like common.
I can stop sharing my screen.
Hold on. I think I can probably force you to. Yeah. Yes. I think we can definitely see some common topics in group behavior, conflicts of interest, lack of criticism, and a very Western-centric view already in just two different presentations. So yeah. I think I'll just hop on to the next participant, though, for the time being, and that would be Gio. Born in the Philippines, Gio currently lives in Vietnam and is a writer and an artist, but also active as a photographer and sometimes DJ. Gio, hi.
Hello. Yes, I'm gonna sound very narcissistic after that presentation. Well, first of all, thank you for the workshop. Yes, of course, goes without saying, I've learned a lot, and I'm very happy for the chance to be, you know, more reflective on journalism and I guess like my role in that. If you notice in my bio, it doesn't say journalist. Because it's been a while since I've even, and I have sort of, and this is my presentation, I'm trying to present kind of this aversion to journalism. Yes, and disclaimer, it's kind of broad strokes because I'll explain later that there's like, same as Aman said, there's not really like a niche journalism in the Philippines. It's more, if you're a journalist, you work for newspapers or like a big media company, something like this. Anyway, so first, number one is I actually write freelance writer on my immigration card. So yeah, because how I feel like, how can I call myself a journalist when going back to this IFJ Code of Ethics, Article 13, and it's funny because I called out resident advisor about it yesterday, but really it was me projecting that in good faith, I can't say that I'm an ethical journalist then, if for all my years I've been working kind of propaganda, advertising. Last year, one of the big projects was I worked for a book for the government. And even if it's like, it shows you land use profile, statistics, all of the research, Is it not propaganda for the city? Anyways, yes. So like to me, how can I say I'm a journalist when um, all of the things I've done so far are maybe not ethical? Number two, I'm objectively not affiliated with any publication, so this is also why. Uh, and I'll just go to right into number three. It's about the state of media and journalism in the Philippines. According to the International Federation of Journalists, the Philippines is the most dangerous place to be a journalist in the world. Um, so, wait, notes, sorry. Yeah, basically, uh, I'll give you a history of it. Uh, Journalism has always been political in the Philippines. It's about exposing the government or fighting the colonial power. Um, and now it's more of uh, print is dead. So so I can give you like news topics, current news topics. The largest media network in the Philippines just got its whole. That was the government just said enough. Like it's gone. You're not renewing your license because they have been critical about the government. So everything. It's a TV network. They have magazines. They own a newspaper. I think all just gone. People out of jobs. Goodbye. Another thing. So this happened because basically the government is now introducing their own channel. Or they're gonna have the government newspaper, et cetera, because of course they want control. Another important thing, Maria Ressa, she's a journalist. She was one of my professors, and she was the founder of an independent news website in the Philippines, very critical of the government again. And she's arrested twice. Once for they tried to pin her with cyber crime, cyber libel. So by the way, the Philippines has these laws about certain things that you can not post online, like even just bad mouthing the president. So she was uh, arrested for this, and then it was turned over because the the article in question came out before the cybercrime law passed, something like this. So she was again arrested later on for tax evasion. Mm, Anyways, it's the as you can see, journalists are targeted by the government when they are critical. Um, number what's next? So current state of the media. So everyone gets their news now online. Facebook. Another fact for you, like the Philippines is the highest average social media use in the world. I think it's around 4 hours, and the global average is 2 hours. Uh, and this is also why I'm not on Facebook because it's totally toxic and negative. Um, Other than that, on social media, there has been evidence to show that the government has paid for trolls. It's funny, okay, I'm shooting myself in the foot because yesterday I said something about like cancel culture is harmless and it's all just gonna live on the internet. But in reality, the social media is being weaponized in the Philippines by so the government has paid a huge sum. The name of our president has been footnoted in the archives of Cambridge Analytica, and so there are paid troll farms that basically like try to create confusion in the public, or like, oh, this is fake news, or they will promote. Well, I think you kind of understand because this happens also in other places. It's just that there's physical evidence of troll farms in the Philippines, paid by the government. Okay, I think that was it. And I'm gonna tie it into so myself. So how does that work for me as a writer or in music journalism? I will go back to this code of ethics, and we said a lot about public interest in, like we were mentioning, this is the mission of a journalist, but actually like the first point, it says it's really about access to information. And to me, this is something that we've been talking about repeatedly. It's actually a mission towards transparency. I don't want to be too like philosophical, but instead of like seeing it as this uh, obligation to truth, to me, writing or my job as a journalist is more as um, not what that truth is per se, but reporting on the transparency, like conveying that message. It could be about music, it could be about whatever it is, but it's addressing the things that need to be said or that the public should know. So yeah, back to the public interesting. Uh, I missed the whole section about talking about what I did because okay, I'll just say it, I guess. Um, like most like young aspiring journalists in the Philippines, you end up in advertising because there's no money in journalism. Um, and so you sell your soul, you go corporate, and you give up all credibility, and you still have no money. I even tried to atone for all this corporate greed by working at an NGO, and it just made my life more ironic. But I guess, yeah, that's what I have to say about journalism in the Philippines. How it relates to the world, sure, we'd like some help. And yeah, so thank you for this. And I will say sorry to Groove Magazine and Kurta Institute, because I think you might have hired a con artist.
Uh, First off, thank you for telling us all of this and presenting this very different set of questions and a lot more urgent set of problems than journalists as a whole, as a group, face in the Philippines. I'm very confident that we did not hire a con artist, and you pointing this out makes me even more confident that we did not. We hired you because we thought, or we didn't hire you actually. We just wanted you as a participant here because yeah, we thought you had a story and you needed to share it. And so yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that little window. Crystal has joined us in the meanwhile, but maybe we go over to Gustavo first. Gustavo was born in Guatemala and is currently based in Brazil, and has been working as a radio journalist and educator, but also a writer, as a writer and editor for fanzines or his own blog. For example, it's not all about music, and he's already sharing his. Okay, this is gonna be interesting. Thank you, Gustavo. Gustavo, I think you don't have your mic on.
Yeah. So thank you. Good morning, good evening, good night. Happy birthday, Aman. Thank you to all my colleagues before and after. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Groove. Thank you, Get Institute. Thank you, Internet. Thank you, COVID. I will invite you to get out a little bit of our niche as a electronic music enthusiast or music enthusiast. I want you invite to get out the sum of that little niche. And in advance, I ask you sorry for put a lot of text in my sheets, but as you have been listening, my Latin English for the moments is very confusing because I am Spanish native. I mean, I speak Spanish native, and now I'm living in Brazil, and I am trying to learn Portuguese and talk with you requires to talk in English. So it's a mental process interesting for me. So I did this more or less the same thing that Fadi did. They took some of the questions that Chris sent to us, And I will try to add some more that I wrote. If I extend too much, please stop me and let's go. Why is music journalism important in this day and this age? I think because of the same importance of the first day that it was, in my opinion, it was exercised, although not under that title. All these guys or girls that painted this rupestre art, Egyptian art, Mesopotamic art, Chinese art, Indian art, Greek, Roman art. All these people are kind of the first music journalists in the human history, because they are literally graphically documenting the spirit of an era manifested through musical language, and and in this time we have the addition that this documentation can be diversified to the extension of diversity of people who report and provide feedback of the musical creation around the world. I think this workshop program is a very good example of that. Um, we, yeah, my vision as a music journalist is reiterated that music is not just entertainment, that is directly connected to the culture and the individual and collective intelligence of the context that is created, and that for it is a dialogue that cannot be perpetually condemned to the categories or genres of the market and the hegemonic languages and perceptions of reality. How I characterize the media coverage in my country. Well, first of all, this is a mapamundi. This is where we all live, for good or for bad. I really love it, because in this mapamundi you can see how, for example, how Brazil can directly match with Africa, and when the that remember those when the supercontinent was already alive, the Pangea, I don't know if you know that history, but one day, so much time ago, we all was the same continent. So, well, this is America. All of this is America. I don't know if you see my cursor on the screen. Yeah. Okay. All this is America. I will do a close-up. This is America, but I need to say to all the people watching this, or that will watch it after, or for the books, that all of this is America, not just this. This is a country of America. This is the United States of America. America, it's all these countries of this. This is North America. This is Central America. I come from here, Guatemala. This is South America. I'm exactly here in Brazil. This is the Iceland. Here is Cuba, Dominican Republic, the Antilles. I mean, this is all America. So it's important to ubicate us. Well, this year I moved from Guatemala in Central America. I moved more than 6,000 kilometers to Foz do Iguaçu, where I am now. That is kind of center of South America. I am Brazil, but I am neighbor of Paraguay and Argentina. So I will say that neither music, nor art, nor culture are subjects of public interest. I think that I mentioned it before in some of the sessions. There are a few specialized music journalists, but the media are readily independent, and therefore the spaces are general filled with mainstream and superficial topics. For me, it's an irony. Shows you this picture is a cover of the major journal in Guatemala, and this is a cover of 9 years ago. It's about a death of an Argentinian singer that was I don't know if it's say accidentally or indirectly killed in Guatemala City. Some people tried to kill the promoter who books Facundo Cabral to perform in Guatemala, and Facundo was traveling with the promoter in his car, and when the people shot the promoter, indirectly killed Facundo. So it's, for me, it's an irony, because the press never talks about music, and when talks about music, it's about a bad thing, but it talks a lot about the context in which the music take place in a country like Guatemala and Central America. But I don't know if you see it. Okay, I will not I will not let the video, the whole video, but I wanted to show you this because some days ago it went so viral in Central America and in North America, and I am in the South. I am talking about it in the South, so in some way it is here too. It is a man from, it is a, yeah, it is a dude from Guatemala City, from the Zona 5 of Guatemala City, where I from. I am from the Zona 5, the 5th zone of Guatemala City, and it means a lot because it talks a lot about the context of how the music, and specifically the electronic music has been part of the history of the subcultures in Guatemala. I don't know if you know, but Guatemala were in a war of more than 30 years, civil war of more than 30 years. So at the late 80s and first 90s, a disco wave and a high energy wave took place in the subculture, but precarious niches or places. So in this video, we can see that he is literally dancing in where he lives. He's with his bright shoes. He is already a man who repairs shoes. So and the history is a little bit longer because it video was recorded to participate in a spontaneous online dance festival that came on with the COVID, and it's called COVID Dance 2020, and a lot of people are sending just them videos dancing this high energy music or this disco music. So for me, it's interesting to put in contrast this negative and this positive, and because this is a cover too of a journal of Mexico, and it resonated to them because in Mexico, maybe Steph will say something about it or maybe not. Occurs this big party called Patrick Miller that is not for that is not for it is specifically to high energy and disco music, 80s, 90s music. So that's why it resonates a lot in Mexico, at least. So I will go faster. Which magazines and publications are discovered to your scene, specifically electronic music in Central America? known from November 2013 to May 2016. I directed El Danzante, a printed fanzine for an electronic music collective called Danzón Pérez, with whom I had the opportunity to travel and get to know some of the scenes in Salvador, the Mexican Riviera, Mayan Riviera, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. All this is practically Central America. We in those times we still believe in the printed format and the vinyl format. So we spent a lot of money in that, and that's why we can't continue. But then we went digital too. So we launched the Danzón website. We invited, I saw that you featured the Zombies in Miami in one of your resident podcasts. We invited Zombies in Miami 5 years ago or 6 years ago to Guatemala to our release party of our website. I have really good memories about these times being editorial director of this fanzine, because as I said, I travel and I get very interested. I did some interested features like this. This was a coverage of a festival that took place in Tegucigalpa in Honduras called Modular. That day, for that edition, Balto, I think he is online. Cheers, Balto. He invited Paula Temple, and originally also Lena Villikens, but she had an accident in Mexico and she didn't. She can do it. She can did it, but I think it was. I don't know if it's the first, but for me was the first underground festival headlined by women in Central America, in one of the most dangerous cities in the world, because I don't know if you know, but Honduras in Central America, unfortunately, it has two of the most dangerous cities in the world, Tegucigalpa and San Pedro Sula, but Balto does an amazing job with his modular platform there. And they put, this is literally the street in front of the Identity Museum of Tegucigalpa, so it's very interesting. And I have really good memories about that coverage about Modular 2015. See, oh, I didn't mention, but let me see. Yeah. Since 2017, I have been writing on my personal music blog. It's not all about music, which has no presence on social networks and therefore no agenda, no commercial pressure. And I use it to document what I like. I follow artists and record labels, as many of us do. My criteria for deciding what to write about is when the days go by and something continues resonating in my head. So I will show you some Latin American media when I do my research to write. It turns out that we have coincided in some coverage. So en México, por ejemplo, Ibero 909, en Colombia, Medellín Style, Argentina, Buenos Aliens, Chile, No Nací en Manchester, Brasil con Isao Electrónica, DJ Mag has its edition for Latin America and for Brazil too. And Spain, by the language, by the Spanish language, cover a lot the Latin American artists. And resident advisor for sure, but it's interesting that the Iceland, for example, doesn't have present. Trinidad and Tobago and a couple of countries of Latin America doesn't have presence and resident advisor, and that is interesting. So why it not receives more attention? I think it's because, as we have seen, dancing is something that aren't to the human space. The electronic music is in Latin America has been aimed to those who can pay tickets. It had been exclusivized, and with that has been categorized by marginalized population as something foreigner, something always longer, somewhere afar. So some question that I start to ask to me are, should the scenes in Latin America be involved in reducing inequality? How can they contribute to reduce inequality? When we talk about obstacles, some years ago I was left out with a platform for something that I will call conflict or of ideological processes. So I didn't want to because I didn't want to participate in events in a venue in Guatemala City financed by political corruption. So, but it was the most economically sustainably for the collective I was working on. So, and until now, there are not many platforms in you can still watch, see my screen? Yeah, okay.
It's all good.
Okay, until now, there are not many platforms in Latin America that are willing to pay you to generate journalistic content. My colleagues said, all of them are just filling in spaces. This paragraph of the right side is important to me because, on the other hand, America has a problem. Most of its countries have never been able to be the civilization that lived here 500 years ago. Here were practically exterminated by the colonizers. So what we call America is actually an identitary invention that it was forcibly assimilated, and that is why English America, United States, aspired to be a Europe in America, and now Latin America, and now we here in Brazil, where I study, and we are studying that in order to break that identitary co-option, we have to bet on resuming the consideration of Abya Yala, which has how the continent was known by the native peoples before becoming colonizers. I am finishing. I'm studying now cultural mediation, and it's very interesting because I don't know if you remember when I was asking to Christina about how we as journalists introduce people and new generations to electronic music. We play a role like a tourist guide. I don't know if you see like that, but we play we play like a tourist with a tourist like a tourist guide. So this is an illustration of La Malinche. La Malinche is a very famous woman in Mexico and in Latin America. And this is for me the role of a mediator. And if a journalist is a mediator, for me, she are us, we are she. They are the colonizers, they are the native people. So this paragraph of this paragraph of the conquest of America, the problem of the other of Svetan Todorov, it's very, very interesting. I don't know if I can read it so quickly, or do you want to read it? But because it says some interesting things, like, for example, in the absence of always be bilingual, for example, in the absence of being bilingual, we are inevitably B or 3 cultural. And for me, that is interesting because yeah, as Aman said, maybe the music genres born in some specifically places in the world, but when it traveled around the world, it becomes a mixture of things. So it is interesting this role of intermediary of how the new generations or the people that doesn't know about electronic music start to know about it. So it's interesting. Um, which options I see to change the discourse about regional music scenes, both also globally. Electronic music scene has yet to find its place of pertinence in most of Latin American countries, and the scenes in each country have to position themselves politically. It's not enough for DJs and producers to play and make music with sounds typical of the region, because there is a very fine line between influence and cultural appropriation. I don't want to name some of these artists, but are some of them very famous, just making field recordings and using all this stuff to productions. But thanks to the dance floor promoted by electronic music, today diversity is fighting itself more than ever, and knowing the difference that unite us will always be interesting to prove that we can live together in peace. So this is in Spanish. How these scenes can deliver safe spaces to the meet of diversities? How can these scenes offer these safe spaces to the encounter of these diversities? Because when Svetan Todorov, this is interesting, because Svetan Todorov talk about the conquest of America, but he's talking about the problem of don't know the other. And when we don't know the other, we assume a lot of things and stereotype a lot of things. So what would I like to see more or less, considering the current climate in international music journalism? I want more rare and significant album reviews, not just new albums. For me, it's time to listen more and get to know music better. It seems to me that crossing these reviews with history and other social science could be interesting. More people of the scene talking like the normal human person that they are. For example, yesterday I was watching the Fire program. I don't like the Fire, but he sat down with Rebolledo, Radio Slave, and that's interesting because the reference that I had of the Fire was when he went to Guatemala in early 2000, and he get a lot of money for that presentation. So I don't know. It's weird that to be likely close. I don't know. It's interesting to do. But I will talk a little bit after. I want less live streams, or at least DJ or live strikes of live streams. I want less content exclusively in English. I think that if you make numbers, there is a lot of people that talk Spanish. There is a lot of people that talk Portuguese. There is a lot of people that talks another languages. So the market, there is the audiences, but you need to talk another languages. Which dynamics, structures, or in music journalism I'm most critical of, and why? I am super critical in promoting something that as what is not. For example, the last year, one promoter booked art department, but we all know that this is just 50% of art department, and I really hate that this kind of acts went to Guatemala very late and very expensive. So it's kind of recycling shit. So the scene in Latin America not aspire to be the same as in Europe or in United States, because we are different. So we need to break this aspirationalism of white male electronic music heroes. And for sure the other guy in our department, I can't remember his name right now, but for me, the singer, for me, he was already the best of our department. But as I say, which recent trends in music journalism should, on the other hand, be emphasized and supported. Conversation between diverse DJs and personalities from the scene. It will be interesting to cross teams. For example, it will be interesting play a lot with diversity. Invite the most diversity people you can find out there and made a table of diversity of voices. It will be more interesting. And as my colleague said, more educational content that build critical audiences that stop making famous stupid people. And to finish, what ideas to have more international exchange? Well, in my experience, alliances, exchanger, journalists going to experience music in other regions of the world. I love a lot made chronicles. So for me, an interesting way to promote the exchange could be, I don't know, promote an exchange of journalists and traveling and experience the music in another way. It's always we are always saying the same, but in different forms. We are, and sometimes feeling the same, but in different forms. So it's important to know how to feel each other. Thank you so much, and excuse me for the extension.
Thank you, Gustavo. That literally went from cave paintings to what was it, The Prodigy, right? From that one album. Okay, thank you very much. I think there's a lot to pick up on here, but first off, Crystal has joined us in the meanwhile and wanted to say something as well. Crystal comes from the motor / more importantly, Techno City Detroit in the US. And she writes for, amongst others, Black Bandcamp and highlights the work of Black producers from the Midwest. Crystal, would you like to go? Your mic's not on.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you, guys. So I think I applied for and I came into this fellowship thinking about what my role would be as a journalist. I'm still fairly new to the field. And I think that there's been a path laid out for me that looks like highlighting and documentation of Detroit artists and Black artists specifically, but kind of as this has progressed and as I've kind of had these conversations with myself, I've realized that the one thing that I'm finding that's lacking when we talk about Detroit techno is criticism around Detroit techno, and specifically criticism around gender issues within the genre. So I think that I'm trying to reach a place where it doesn't feel like it's going to be like a complete social death for me to go about doing that. But I think that it is, there's been so many articles about the origins, about the founders, and like pretty much every single article, every single documentary, et cetera, it is about these male figures. But from being here and from connecting with women in the city, I know that's not necessarily the case. And if it is the case, it's not because of lack of interest from women, but it's from the hypermasculinity of the genre within the city that doesn't quite allow for the appreciation or valuation of more feminine elements, such as collaboration, vulnerability, emotional intelligence. And I think that that is the story, and that is kind of what's missing when we talk about the genre, is the critical analysis of it. And I feel, especially when we were talking this week about conflicts of interest, to do that, and I think especially, I think a lot of Black women journalists who I do admire very much and who have been responsible for me kind of starting on this path are kind of stuck in the role of speaking positively about the Detroit techno scene and like contributors. And I think that as long as we're kind of expected merely to highlight and to document rather than to have a critical analysis of what we're seeing, I don't think much is going to change. I don't think much has changed in the past 30 years of the culture. And I think that is predominantly due to hypermasculinity in between, and also because of the mythological status Detroit techno holds around the world. And what I kind of feel is like a fear of criticizing it. You know, I'm pretty young, so I imagine that there was a lot more, the discourse in the 90s was different than where we've reached it now. But where I've reached it now is seeing articles on RA that are written by white dudes who won't criticize Black musicians for fear of being called racist. And ultimately, I'm like, then maybe you shouldn't be the one covering it. But I also believe that it does a disservice to music journalism as a whole for us to kind of be stuck in that rut. And I think that my positioning as a Black woman has allowed me to see kind of like the inner community around these issues and kind of develop my own like ethnographic take on it. But I think I've also been able to kind of research and get to know other women who around globally. I have a peer in Berlin that I talk to quite often who are kind of putting together these critiques, but aren't really making headway with like making them known, you know, for whatever reason. So I think that's kind of my own personal perspective of Detroit techno, because I think we can highlight women as much as we want, but if we're not directly addressing the core issue, which is misogyny within Detroit techno, then it's all gonna look rather superficial. So let me see if I had any more talking points. I wasn't super prepared for this, but I kind of just pulled it together.
That's okay. That's absolutely fine. Thank you so much. That's such an important aspect, I think, actually, of our work that we haven't really spoken about so much. I think challenging already existing narratives that just like piled up over the years and are never really questioned, but instead celebrated. Thank you. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to what you're going to make of that in form of the article. Thank you so much, Crystal. And yeah, so the time is flying. Next up would be Ilgas in a little bit of a distorted alphabetical order. Ilgas was born and raised in Turkey and has written extensively on the country's music scene and particularly the queer clubbing scene. And he's currently writing his master's thesis as a student of musicology in Berlin. Hi, Ilgas.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, in the last 2 weeks was like very interesting for me. Thank you for organizing this and also for the for my like fellow participants. It was very insightful for me because I had been kind of distant from doing journalistic work for the last few years due to several reasons. I'd written for an online blog in Turkey, Bir Baba Indie, and did some radio shows in Germany at the free radios which are founded by the government. Yeah, but I kind of stopped doing that in the last few years because it was not really sustainable. And like when you were saying, okay, like as journalists, we shouldn't be like writing for free, etc. Yeah, I thought like, okay, well, I had to kind of do it for some time, especially writing in Turkish. And yeah, I think that has to do with the kind of the recent history of music journalism in Turkey. I think there was a break in 2008 So before that, there were several music magazines in Turkey that focused on different genres, different scenes, etc. I mean, I don't think that they were all great and like quite inclusive. I think they were also quite manipulated by different factors, but they were nonetheless platforms that solely focused on music. And in 2008 and 9, the current government, in an like effort to gain more control over the media, they filed like lawsuits against media companies which own those magazines, and there was just like so much loss of money that the first publications that disappeared were music magazines. I mean, all of a sudden they were all gone, and so the the transition to online platform already started with that, and that's where I started writing for online blogs. And what I observed was also what was already mentioned, this dilemma of, okay, I want to offer like more exposure to local acts, but can I be critical as well? So this like conflict of interest, it already like started. For example, at that time when I was writing, some indie rock bands, they were being covered by the British magazines. They were like getting concert offers from abroad. And I wrote a slightly critical article, and it was like, you know, you're doing so much harm to the scene in general. So it was like, okay, somehow like being like writing about Turkish scenes, okay, maybe there are so many like complex dynamics that it is tricky, I realized. Yeah, and with the online blogs, they also after a while turned to artist agencies, and nowadays I think there aren't so much like discourse generated around music, musicians. I think the only like only scene that is active is still the like queer electronic music scene that also somehow developed in the last 5 years, that became more vocal, and I think it was also some sort of solidarity due to also like pressure from government that banned demonstrations, events, talks. So people kind of shifted to nightlife, and yeah, that blossomed. And when they're covered, it's mostly on feminist platforms and journals. Yeah, and yeah, I'm still like trying to figure out how to pick it up again and maybe put the focus a bit more on music and not just the more like political activity, like integrate the musical part a little bit more. And also what happened is that there's a very, like in the last 5 years, there was a high, well, migration was very happening, especially to Germany. So many acts that I written about when I was in Turkey, they're now in Berlin. So you see that there's also this like shift. Okay, local is not local anymore, or local is local somewhere else. Like just recently, the most popular rapper from Turkey, he released his new album, and it was released in Berlin. Like due to several reasons, he had to move to Berlin, and now and it also applies to me. Now I'm also asking myself, where can I write? What can I write about? How should I be writing about? Yeah, I think, and I don't have so much of a solution, but I think the music writing was a bit late on this shift of, okay, like local, global, just merging together, and division. I think this like division of global south and north is still very yeah, felt. And I think it's like this workshop was a great idea. That's why that we share our experiences. And I think, yeah, it should be like more talked about. Otherwise, yeah. Yeah, I guess that's all that I would love to say.
Thank you. That's a lot already, and yeah, it's very interesting to also have this perspective for us as Germans, obviously, because as some of you may know, and there's a lot of people from Turkey who migrated here in the 50s and 60s and later on, and but a lot of Turkish people or people with a Turkish background, so to speak, have not really been accepted by German mainstream society, and so yeah, that's also, I think, like a topic that is like kind of important if we talk about Turkish music. And yeah, and Jackie just says in the chat that that she lost a comment about the local being local somewhere else, and I think that's something that, yeah, like in some kind of way, like is true for all music journalism to a certain extent. You always try to like get out of like your the own world that you're in, but of course, like it's also very, very different if you go somewhere else and look back on where you came from. So yeah, thank you very much. And oh, it's already 2:15, but so yeah, we're from Turkey. We're taking a plane to Beijing in China, where Jamie is based. Originally from Hong Kong, she is a freelance writer and translator, and has worked for publications such as The Nation or BAFLA. Hi, Jamie.
Hello, hi. This is actually the perfect place to be presenting this because I'm right now in a place called Aranya, which is 3 hours from Beijing, where a local club called Jiaodai is hosting the first post-pandemic electronic music festival in China. So it's very exciting and intriguing and interesting for a lot of reasons that I hope maybe I'll get a chance to report and write about. But I think this is actually the kind of perfect situation to explain the music journalism and the electronic music scene here. To give a little bit of context, I guess the existing electronic music scene in China right now has, I think, gone from emerging for the past, I think, 10 years to, I think, a quite to a more maturing place now. And I think by this, I mean that saying that so-and-so is coming up with a new thing from China is no longer an valid and exciting statement. I think there has to be some kind of more critical discourse on why so-and-so is exciting from China, rather than just the fact that there's electronic music in China. But the existing music journalism here is quite fractured in the year 2020, I would say. First of all, there is a language divide between Chinese publications and English publications. And I think for the purpose of where I write as a journalist, which is in English, I'm a little bit more knowledgeable about English, which I'll speak more about. But it's fractured in the sense that there isn't really an authoritative source or collective that you can go to for solid introductions to music or criticism. It's quite scattered in that English publications like Resident Advisor, Bandcamp, Crack, Mixmag, DJ Mag, they'll all cover it, but it's there's not really like a centralized source. There are a couple of very good journalists over the years who are very, very knowledgeable, such as Josh Viola, who used to be a music editor at English language Chinese publication called Radii, and he for a long time has been a go-to source for a lot of people to learn about Chinese music. But now for political reasons and circumstances, there are even less and less English-speaking journalists in China. So that also contributed to why the discourse is kind of fractured. And I think at the same time, there are also a lot of crossover coverage. You might often see Chinese musicians covered in fashion magazines or art magazines, because there are a lot of overlap in kind of this aestheticization of China as a vision of the future, I think, for a lot of Western narratives in terms of like magazine coverage. So that helps in terms of exposure, but again, it doesn't contribute criticism and like building context and language to speak about this. So I would say those are kind of the existing landscape and challenges. And so I think for my role and my hope and goals for covering music in China, which I would limit myself so far to Beijing because China is still a big place. And I'm hoping to be able to go in from an angle that it's more cultural and political, because I do see clubs and club music as places of fun and privilege in this current time and place in China, where the government is very intent on regulating fun. And then so I think there's a lot of underlying tension and kind of unexplored things that we don't often get to talk about in terms of music writing, when especially for English readers that are still kind of focused on, you know, the AI or futuristic things or the aesthetics. And in turn, I hope that music would be a window to tell more stories about this part of the world that is kind of beyond, you know, what usually is in the news or the kind of usual narratives. Yeah, because I think it is like clubs are quite also unstable places that are always kind of at the mercy of policies. And so I think it's a very context specific moment, I think, for club music in China. And that's what I'm hoping to contribute to. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you for contributing. And I think what you're saying rings true for all of us, kind of, that we all kind of feel sort of like political, maybe obligation, or at least like, but it seems to me that every one of us is like very concerned with like political implications of what is commonly referred to as like just music. Which is why I love Gustavo's blog name. It's what's it? It's not all about music. Because yeah, it's become very clear, I think, in like those past 2 weeks that what we care most about are actually social questions and political questions, and how those are manifested and facilitated by music. And so yeah, thank you. And yeah, without much further ado, we have Jackie up next. Jackie Queens is a singer and songwriter born in Zimbabwe and currently based in Johannesburg, where she, amongst other things, runs her label Bay Electronica. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yeah.
Perfect. Hi, Jackie. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for all your contributions, and of course to Chris and Laura. So I'm going to speak in sort of general terms about electronic music journalism in South Africa. So when I think of what electronic music journalism looks like here, I struggle with an optimistic interpretation of it, because on the one hand, you have platforms, that are considered the go-to places, which oscillate between promoting brands, festivals, and PR for artists. And then on the other, there's this huge gap in critical writing on the subject and the documentation of scenes that's not aligned to brands. So mostly alcohol brands, energy drink brands, and alcohol brands and energy drink brands. But it's not to say that there hasn't been any writing ever. There is, but it's mostly from platforms on the fringes, which sort of come and go. So you'll find that there's quite a lot of archive stuff, or people will start platforms, and then obviously because it's not really sustainable, then they fall away. And then, of course, like I said, there's like the major sort of branded content stuff, which is not to say that, some of it hasn't been instrumental in sort of talking about the scene. I mean, there are some brands that have been putting in the work over the years. But I mean, as we've seen in recent times, once they decide to divest, that leaves a really huge gap. Yeah, so we have a lot of that, and while this like South African dance music has made like huge strides overseas, it's hardly discussed in depth at home. So there's a stark contrast between how electronic music is covered in comparison to other genres like jazz or hip hop or the other more popular local genres. So when I think about the writing I consume, it's by and large from publications outside of the country, some of whom have written about South African dance music and made documentaries even. And the conversations are driven by artists who are gaining visibility globally. So you'll find that they'll sort of pick up on these artists once they start to make noise in Europe or the US. And then we also have freelance writers who have a history of pitching stories about underground scenes to major publications. So part of the story is that there isn't interest in these stories at home, because I've heard from some writers who say that they struggle to pitch these stories locally. And most of what is written here in South Africa is mainstream in its outlook. The other part of it is that we haven't, within our respective scenes, prioritized documentation. So what I mean by that is there's a huge sort of reliance on creating the music and not so much on talking about it or canonizing it. And there's various reasons for this, from things like access to resources or to a lack of knowledge on how to engage with the media, for example. So within this context, I think freelancers have played a key role in getting the word out globally. I know a few people whose work I can actually think of that has made an impact in this regard. So you'll find that there aren't people who write specifically on electronic music, but they write about music as a whole, and you'll find across different publications, people with bylines with different types of articles on sort of marginalized scenes in South Africa. And there's quite a few people I know who I could say, have made like efforts to talk about South African music that isn't well known. In terms of like what I think about like how like in relation to South Africa and sort of the global environment, I think in this current time that we're in, when I look at how Black Lives Matter has ignited a global shift to amplifying Black artists and voices in electronic music, I think this presents a great opportunity to tell more stories about our music and the artists who make it, because sometimes that story gets lost. Like I mentioned, there's quite a few artists now who are sort of breaking the mold globally, but the story of where the music comes from, or the music that they play, or the music that they make, is lost within sort of hyping them up as the leaders of a particular genre or the leaders of a particular scene. especially in the genre that I'm more familiar with, which is Afro House. The phrases and the contributions of women are literally, yeah, they don't exist. Women do not exist in Afro House, and yet everybody wants a vocalist. That's a major sticking point for me. So nobody's talking about the women who contribute to the sound and its growth. So in future, I'd like to see more on that, more reporting on women in general, and like also the interrogation of the power dynamics between Europe and Africa as we continue to see the ascension of Afro House in these spaces. You know, with regards to how there's a sort of colonization of the sound, appropriation, cultural appropriation, if you want to call it that, you know, where you have producers who make the music, but they aren't actually contributing to the communities and to, you know, sort of some of the producers whose work they actually use all the time, to, you know, sort of interrogating the spaces in which Afro House artists are playing in now that are largely white and wouldn't actually, you know, be open to having more Black patrons. So there's a lot of discussion about that, about how, you know, we could play in a certain space, but if I went as a Black person with a bunch of friends, I wouldn't get in, type thing. So there's like so many things that I would love for us to talk about. And I really resonated with what Crystal said, because especially in our space, it's very difficult to be critical, because everyone feels like you are tearing down someone who's making, you know, people are making names for themselves and they're pushing everybody along when, yeah, you know, you get to a certain point or level in your career as an artist, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's for the good of everybody else. So it's very difficult to talk about house music, specifically in South Africa, in a critical way, in a way that people can appreciate that you're, you know, trying to advance the scene. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Also, that was a lot, and yeah, thanks for shedding a little bit of light on the whole issue. Because first off, yes, I've also always been wondering, like, how is like that music that is coming from the continent and specifically South Africa in the past few years, like how is that discussed locally? And it was interesting to hear that, well, it's not really being discussed, or not so much. And yeah, also the appropriation, you could also, I guess, like just downright call it exploitation of Afro House by, you know, just Dutch and German whiteys. That's definitely a topic, yeah. And yeah, so I'm also very much looking forward and to reading what will be the result of this workshop program in November, hopefully. So yeah, we go on, and we go a little bit up north to Nairobi in Kenya, where Lucy is based. Lucy covers a very impressive range of East African countries in her work as a writer, but also artistic rights defender. And she is active for a variety of magazines and organizations, most notably as the editor of the Music in Africa Foundation. Hi, Lucy. Hi. I think you're very...
Can you hear me?
Yes, now it's better.
Okay, good. Just to correct, I am the East African editor of Music in Africa Foundation. Yes, we are a senior editor based in Johannesburg, where our headquarters are based. So I cover the East African region, which includes Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Eritrea, and yeah, Sudan and South Sudan.
Excuse me, Lucy. Sorry, is it possible to turn up the volume a little, because you seem a little quiet?
Is it okay now?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you so much, and sorry for interrupting.
Okay. So what was the last thing you heard?
That I gave incorrect information about you, and that you're the East African editor, right? Did I hear that?
Yes. So yeah, so I did say that I cover Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Sudan, South Sudan, Djibouti, and Eritrea. Yes, and Burundi. So I'm going to be a bit quick because I know we're running out of time. So I'll just roughly go through my presentation. First of all, I want to say thank you to the Goethe Institute and the Groove Magazine for this wonderful 2 weeks. I mean, they always say there's always room for learning, and I have really learned a lot. The notes will come in handy. I already got really interesting story ideas that I cannot wait to implement in my future writing. So I've been practicing for 3 years. This is my 4th year. And in during that period, media has always played an important role in the music industry. Although traditional media, that is newspapers, still wield power in the form of in formulating or forming the public opinion. So a lot of people believe what they see on the newspaper and believe what they see on TV and radio, and they take it as the gospel truth. So in most time, the kind of content that they're promoting has either been sponsored or it's just based on selfish reason. That is maybe the artists that they're friends and stuff like that. So that's also a huge challenge when it comes to maybe someone from outside the region who's trying to look for a new fresh talent, because most of these media houses do not really go and look for new talent. They just want to keep riding on the fame of the current popular artists. And so that's where I come in as well. So I'm very passionate about discovering new talent. I'm very passionate about providing coverage for musicians that are censored, such as traditional musicians. They don't get any airtime on TV, radio, or newspapers interviews. Same for musicians that compose protest music. And we're living in times where we really need to speak truth to power, and these musicians have been blocked. I speak to some of my colleagues in, maybe, for example, Tanzania is very notorious of censoring artists. I speak to them and I ask them why they don't cover these artists, and they say, oh, we cannot do it because if we do, the media house will be shut down. So there's a vacuum for that, and there's need for more people, more writers to come, more platforms to come up and provide coverage for this kind of musicians. Something else that I have wanted to mention was that in my region, there are no publications that are strictly dedicated to reporting music and culture. So we don't have like a Groove magazine in Kenya or Uganda. So there's always a section, a column for entertainment in the newspaper, or a program, that will talk about some issues and then bring in the entertainment side of it. So that really lacks, and I think that's also a reason why there is little interest, especially in huge corporates and government, in investing in the music sector, because this information, the success, the data of the value of culture and music has not really been put out there for people to see. Yes, when the minister reads a budget, he would say, oh, the creative sector is doing very well, it's contributing to the GDP of the country's economy, but nothing else is done. So media also has to. This is where we can actually now blame the media, because there is no much effort that has been put to push for need to push for people to see the value of culture, the value of music, the value of artists, visual musicians, and whatnot. So most we do have websites, of course, that do report on music, but they just write about artists, mostly grapevine or a paragraph announcing a new song or an album. In countries like Tanzania and Uganda, video content is very huge. And you find programs that interview artists, and others are profiling musicians and their work. But I find them very insightful in my case, because I get to listen and I can transcribe into written text. and they're very good at it. They're very good at reporting and writing about artists, but what lacks is the criticism part of it. And this I've come across in my writing, because when I first started, it was very difficult to critique musicians either at festivals or, you know, when they release a new song or album. And most of the time, several times I have trended on Twitter, you know, they would really, you know, get nasty, and you know, you know, some of my friends would send me screenshots of how they were, you know, not really talking nicely about me in their WhatsApp groups because of what I wrote. Initially I would sometimes even cry, but I I have a really nice senior editor who's really nice, and I mean, I think he was able to take me through that process, and now I'm stronger, so it doesn't get to me as much. But what I decided is that I would not provide coverage. I think we talked about this last week on how you were able to decide who to review and who to not. So that gave me the power now to say, next time I'm not going to review you because you might not like what I say. So how about I just work with artists or musicians that I feel will appreciate my work, and that's a way that I go with my reviews. Sorry. When it comes to music performance reviews, we have very few music festivals here that play live music, and for me, I cannot review anything that's on playback. Sorry. And thankfully, we our electronic musicians here, they perform with bands, most of them. Even if there's a DJ set there, it's a there will be someone on the drums, there'll be someone on the bass, and there you're able to absorb all the sounds, and you're able to really transform everything into words. So that's also another challenge here, because most of the regular concerts before the coronavirus were basically inviting artists that play on playback. And so sorry, I was unable to cover most of them. Yeah. Also, in terms of coverage, I did mention this. I also wanted to briefly cover the gender representation in media. Um, Generally, the media, that's whichever department it is, technology, environmental journalism, music journalism, it's heavily male dominated, you know. And um, when I give lectures and I tell people I cannot name any female journalist in my region who does what I do, they just laugh. But it's a fact. There are people who write, there are females who write, but um it is sort of an attitude problem, you know. They have not, like I said before, the industry has not positioned itself to be taken seriously. So you don't even expect the writers, some of them who've not been exposed, to see the value of the industry. For me, I've been fortunate enough to travel, and I meet a lot of journalists from around the continent, especially from West African Francophonie speaking countries, and the UK and Germany. And this is a serious profession, you know, and they really challenge me. But when you come to my region, people would write, yes, but it's like they're jogging on the spot, waiting for something else to happen. And when another opportunity comes, they just run off, you know. So for me, I think I'm in the best place I could be, and only thing that can happen is I can keep getting better in what I do. And I think if we can be able to change the attitude of people, then we can get more serious writers who are passionate, you know, about the music and the culture, and most importantly about telling stories on behalf of artists. Lastly, I think I'm done. I just briefly went through everything because I know we're running out of time. But I just want to also say that it's really important what Gustav said, that as writers, we need to find a way of connecting our content with what's happening on the social political scene. So there's always a story that you can connect with what you're writing. So it is our role, you know. We have a saying in Swahili where we say that sanini kioo cha jamii, And that means that an artist is a mirror of the society. And as music journalists, we are also artists. So it is also in our responsibility to report what's happening in our society. So yeah, so that's it for now. And I'm looking forward to sharing more information about the electronic music scene in the region, because the EDM scene here is on fire. So thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Yeah, I think all of us, we can't wait for the article and like just generally reading more about it, because yeah, it's super interesting what you've all just said, and yeah, like really looking forward to it. But yeah, we do have only a little bit of time, and we have one more to go. Last but definitely not least is Stephanie Torres. Stephanie is a music journalist and media planner based in Mexico City, who's written for a number of publications, and most notably her own blog, Constelaciones en la Piel. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Chris. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Happy birthday, man. Feliz cumpleaños. Well, thanks for all to be here, and I'm the latest. So for me, music journalism in Mexico City, well, in Mexico, has two fronts. On one side, we have the reggaeton, R&B, neopereo, on all these genres, grabbing all the spotlights because reggaeton is the new pop. So, in the other hand, a mix of rock, pop, and electronic music news, but I think 60% of these news are from other countries. And well, of course, we have these regional genres such as cumbia and banda, but that's another way. So going back to electronic music, we don't have a specific magazine specialized in electronic music. I mean, we have two of the most popular global specialized magazine, but most of this content, like 90% of this content, are replicated from the United States or Europe, and of course, they focus a lot on what happens in Berlin, and news talk about Armin van Buuren, Steve Aoki, Deadmau5, and these EDM superstars. So the magazine that publish about electronic music made in our country are those that maintain a profile focused on rock, and the producers that mostly been writing about are the most popular or recognized of Mexico. So as the same as my classmates have said, one of the problems is that journalism is not a well-paid job. So the media that are really supporting national electronic music or this kind of underground music scene are blogs, radio programs, and online radio programs who's talking about the history of our music and open to all kind of genres and doing interviews as a B-side of a full-time job. So also before coronavirus, we used to have a lot of international festivals, but from my perspective, they didn't help too much to local producers. Well, of course, helped another music workers as bookers, stage manager, host, and staff guys. And it's good for our economy, but in the lineups, we found only one or two national artists, friends of the organizers, of course, and white men, of course, also, and so many times they are open or played where there are a few people, like 7 p.m. on 1 p.m. So it doesn't work really to producers or DJs. But I think luckily we have so many labels and collectives that clicking to Paris, release records and compilations. And also we have all genres. Sometimes they are very segmented, but if you're looking for drum and bass, footwork, breaker, high energy, as Gustavo shows, or new wave, no matter the genre that you like the most, you will find a great producers are a community and a place to dance. Some of them well-established clubs, some others more precarious, even exist in public spaces as sonideros, because people dance wherever they can, you know, more now because we don't have a lot of shows, or we don't have a lot of money. And also I'm happy because for a couple of years, different collectives have emerged made up only for women, non-binary persons, and trans people. because Mexico is a very macho place, and even 3 years ago you could see lineups made only by men and white men and popular men. So although those songs are produced in Mexico City, we cannot ignore the sound of different states and collective of the northern states. For example, collectives that follow a struggle to create and enjoy music despite the violence these are around, that it's like lowers collective in Ciudad Juarez, a city sadly known for the high number of feminicizes. So I think it's really important to look for all these kind of genres, not only in the popular ones as techno or house music, because they are popular, and I think here maybe could know someone of them. So for me, what I want as a music journalist is to share the sounds of producers or DJs who are very talented but don't have that economic capacity or contacts, or just don't know how to approach the media. So for me, it's important that more people listen to them. And you don't know, maybe they will find the soundtrack of their lives. And also I see music as a really important part of the story of a country. Maybe a B-side story, not the popular one, but it's important. It's important to me to have a record of what exists in a certain time and place. So I think it's I want to say about Mexico electronic music, and I want to discuss with my three mates.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we can all agree that we prefer the B-sides most of the time around. Yeah. So thank you very much. And yeah, again, this I think like underlined the point that was running through like a lot of basically all contributions today, that yeah, we also see music journalism as a force that mediates and comments on socio-political aspects of the cultures that we report on. And I think that is something that we definitely all agree on to a certain extent. So yeah, thank you also, Steph. And yeah, what now? Laura?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I might cry a little after this. This was really so beautiful. I'm really like, it's kind of a shame, like Gio said, that we didn't do this in the beginning, because I think it would have made more sense if we had all known this before. Sorry about that. We'll, yeah, should have done it the other way around probably, but I mean, we can all, yeah, manage to, I don't know, talk about this some other time, I guess, because actually we need to go to the next part of the program and need to see who's gonna work with whom, or how we're gonna communicate that.
Yeah, I think for now I'll just stop the live stream and we're going to go private. Thank you everyone for listening and commenting and asking questions, and just yeah, following us. It's been really nice to see that there's other people out there who wanted to eavesdrop and just know more, and that's really reaffirming for us, and hopefully also for our participants. And yeah, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Please, I don't know, yeah, look out for the participants' articles to come out in November through Groove magazine. And yeah, thank you. Did I say that? Yes, I did.
Yeah, thank you so much for being part of this and for following us around. And you'll see much more of those guys in a bit, I think.
Definitely.